Good afternoon, fellow board members, the Administrative Committee. We're going to start with the Office of Performance-Based Management and Research update from Alma. Alma, are you here?
So good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Commissioner McMurray. My name is Alma Mujkanovic, and I am the Administrator of the Office of Performance-Based Management and Research, or OPMR for short. I'm very excited and deeply honored to be here today and to talk to you about my office role and the programs that we are managing. So let me start with a brief office overview. OPMR is a small office with 11 full-time positions. We do utilize consultants as needed. The office consists of 2 units. On one side is our performance-based management unit, in charge of the department's strategic planning, asset, and performance management programs, while on the other side is our research unit, in charge of administering and managing our research program. The office collaborates with GDOT offices and districts to facilitate, support, and implement continuous improvements where strategic planning, asset management, performance management, and research drive accountability, efficiency, transparency, and innovation. Displayed on the slide are some of the office deliverables. OPMR facilitates the development of the department's strategic and asset management plans. Department-wide, we have over 300 performance measures that we actively manage. We help the offices and districts develop these measures, but we also store, monitor, and report them. Together with IT, we are maintaining our department's dashboard. It's a visual tool that holds all of our performance metrics data, and it's also used to facilitate our quarterly performance-based management review meetings. And we facilitate those meetings for every single office and district department-wide. On the process improvement side, we are helping offices and districts to analyze their current processes and also to identify any improvement initiatives. We also conduct different surveys. Those are usually customer satisfaction surveys or process-related surveys. On the research side, we are managing all of our active research projects, and we are ensuring that the project scope, schedule, and quality are being met. We are in charge of developing and also updating our research manual, which is our internal document that specifies our internal processes and procedures. Once a year, we do publish a research implementation report, which lists all of our completed research studies and their implementation status. As part of federal requirements, we also are conducting periodic peer exchanges and publishing a report on the topics discussed. So at the end of today's presentation, my goal is to give you a little bit of more insight about these programs, really demonstrate how they are all interrelated and how they drive change and improvements department-wide. So starting with strategic planning, I will go over each one of the programs. Strategic planning is a collaborative process of defining the department's strategy or direction, and this is usually done by the establishment of our mission and vision goals and a plan on how to achieve it. Our strategic planning efforts are in direct alignment with the state of Georgia goals that are listed here, and my office partners with GDOT leadership, districts, and divisions in the development of the department's strategic plan. So when it comes to the strategic plan, we are facilitating those efforts, which really consist of working closely with our executive and senior leadership teams in the establishment of the department's mission and vision statements. Once we have mission statements in place, then we break it down into a set of goals, objectives, and action items. We do add some performance measures to these to assess if over time we are achieving those goals, objectives, and action items, and ultimately our mission. As part of the process, we do define what the expected results are going to look like in our defined outcomes, and we also perform an analysis of our environment in terms of any economic, demographic, legislative, or workforce trends that could potentially impact the department in the future. All of these elements are combined together in our strategic plan. This is a 4-year plan that's updated every year. It's mandated by a state law. Every state agency in Georgia is developing one, and its content is reported to the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. So I'd like to note that this plan is very different from our statewide strategic transportation plan, or SSTP, which is produced by the Division of Planning. The plans have different timeframes, but they are also having different objectives. So our statewide strategic transportation plan is a policy document that describes our existing and future transportation needs over 20 years timeframe. While strategic plan is our department level plan, it outlines our goals and a plan how to achieve those goals in the next 4 years. So just to illustrate how this process really works and how we are breaking this mission into goals and goals into objectives and action items, displayed on the slide is our department's strategy map. And this map really summarizes the main components of our strategic plan in one page. On the top of the map is our mission and vision statements. And our mission is broken down into 4 department level goals that are directly aligned with the state of Georgia goals. And then those goals are broken into objectives and action plans, and on the bottom are our expected outcomes. So when we say that we will deliver a transportation system focused on safety, our 4th goal listed on the map is stating that we are putting Georgian safety first. In terms of outcomes, we are working on reducing fatalities and injuries on our roadways, as well as worker-related injuries. And to do that, we are developing different safety plans and also enhancing our transportation technologies. So why is this process important? Well, it's helping us to achieve Georgia's strategic goals. But in addition, on the department level, it's establishing direction that's guiding our day-to-day operations. It's also overcoming a need for isolated planning and operations, and it's helping us to prioritize initiatives and resources department-wide. Next up is our Transportation Asset Management Program. As the name implies, this program deals with how we manage our transportation assets and also how we make our investment decisions. In very simple terms, transportation asset management can be defined as a data-driven approach to cost-effectively and efficiently manage our infrastructure while considering risks. Our asset management practices are in direct alignment with the achievement of the national transportation goals that are listed here. And OPMR's Asset Project Manager is facilitating the development and implementation of our asset management plan. I'd like to note that this plan is developed in coordination with our executive leadership, as well as with many districts and offices department-wide. We work closely with the Office of Planning, Office of Bridge, State Maintenance Office, Transportation Data, Financial Management, and many others. So when it comes to the asset management plan, the plan contains the following elements: goals and objectives, which are directly related to our mission and our department level goals. Asset inventory and condition levels. When we talk about asset management plan, we are talking about bridges and pavements on the national highway system. So we need to indicate the inventory of those bridges and pavements as well as their condition levels. We need to include performance measures and targets, but also describe our life cycle planning process. In other words, how do we manage those assets from the time when we build them up until we dispose or retire them, and how they're being managed and how we are investing our money in preservation and maintenance and different activities. Financial plan and investment strategies, it's really looking at our projected revenues as well as expenditures over the next 10-year time frame. Performance gap is the gap between our actual versus desired performance. And risk management is the risk to our department as well as the risks that our assets are imposed to. So this is a 10-year plan that's updated every 4 years. As I stated earlier, it includes the National Highway System, bridges, and pavements. It's mandated by federal law, and its content gets reported to the Federal Highway Administration. So displayed on this chart is our National Highway System on the right-hand side, and these charts come directly from our Transportation Asset Management Plan. Also, our inventory and condition levels for both pavements and bridges on the National Highway System are displayed on the chart. So this chart really demonstrates the fundamental principles of the asset management approach. And that is, as our assets condition decreases, the cost of maintaining these assets are increasing exponentially, and identifying the right balance between this asset condition and their needs and the treatment type will not only prolong the useful lives of those assets, but it's going to be cost effective in the long run. So why is asset management important? Well, it's helping us achieve our national transportation goals, but it's also increasing accountability and transparency and ensuring effective and efficient infrastructure management. And as I referred in the past chart, we are really trying to find that perfect balance between the asset condition and the investment levels. Performance management ties it all together, since performance management deals with actively monitoring and evaluating our performance and managing its outcomes. We track our performance through the establishment of performance measures and targets. And as I indicated earlier, department-wide, we have over 300 performance measures. Some of these measures we are using for our regular federal and state reporting purposes. However, the vast majority of the measures are used to assess our internal performance. So my office is helping other offices and districts to develop those measures and also to report them at our quarterly performance management review meeting. So if you are an office or a district within the department, most likely you have a number of performance measures that are used to assess your internal performance. And those performance measures are being regularly reviewed and assessed. So office heads come to meet with their division directors along with our executive leadership teams on a quarterly basis. They're reviewing their performance and they're addressing their immediate needs. So one important thing to note about this process is that performance management is not only about reaching our targets, but it's really about finding strategies and action items to achieve them. So for an example, if there is an office or a unit that's not achieving their set targets, that might indicate that they need some extra resources, or that we need to re-examine their processes and try to streamline them. In some instances, it's something as simple as improving our internal communication and coordination. So our performance management efforts are in direct alignment with the achievement of our plans, but also with the achievement of our department-wide initiatives. So as part of this process, we had to develop a dashboard. And this is a sample of our dashboard that is used to facilitate those quarterly discussions. This dashboard was developed all internally. It was a joint effort between our IT team and my office, and Badir Glass from my office spearheaded those efforts. This was a huge undertaking. It took us over 4 years to complete. But this process, this dashboard really streamlined our data collection processes, which used to be very manual. So as an example of a PMR process, just imagine a room just like this one, where our managers and their division directors, as well as our executives, are gathering to discuss their performance. And this is a sample of our utility metric that comes from the Office of Utilities. So this is a customer service measure that I'm displaying on this slide that deals with how long does it take us to process a Georgia utility permit. Our goal is to do it in 5 days. We are doing it in fewer than 4 days. The next chart comes from our state maintenance office. And this is an example of our pavement condition measure. So we are expressing our pavement condition measure as in terms of OCI. OCI stands for Overall Condition Index. It really combines several different conditions or distresses that we combine in one score. And that score ranges from 0 to 100, where 100 represents good condition pavement. So the chart shows district by district comparison of our critical, high, medium, and low routes. And I have also included a picture of what good, fair, and poor looks like. So performance management is important because it's helping us achieve our goals, objectives, and ultimately our department mission. It's helping us identify and communicate resource need on a department level, but it's also helping us improve processes and performance. Last but not least is our research program. And it would be very difficult to talk about this program without first mentioning its significance. So research program really goes hand in hand with our other programs, especially process improvement, since research is helping us improve our operations through research. So we are not conducting any research internally, but this research is being conducted by several different universities that we contract with, and their college professors and students are delivering research for us. Research not only drives improvements and innovation and provides opportunities for competitive advantage, but it's also identifying some cost-effective solutions to some of our transportation challenges. This is a federally mandated program, and through this program, we are participating in both state and federal level research activities. So as I stated earlier, we are managing research projects, but those research projects are conducted by the Georgia Transportation Institute. It is a consortium of 11 different universities in Georgia, and we usually contract with them. Our annual budget is about $8.2 million. About half of this budget we spend on our internal research projects, and the other half is covering our participation in some of the national research activities, such as Transportation Research Board, National Cooperative Highway Research Program, as well as pooled fund studies, when we really pool our funds with other state DOTs to deliver some of the research topics of common interest at lower cost. All of our research projects that we initiate internally have to have some implementable goals. Our research studies are aligned in the areas of policy and workforce, safety, mobility, and asset management. Displayed on the slide are some of the research projects that we have recently completed. And as you can see, we are utilizing our research money for some practical solutions that will help us with our operations, such as a guidance for virtual public involvement or a framework for a geotechnical asset management program. But we are also looking at some complex issues, such as how to incorporate resiliency in our organization. In average year, we manage anywhere from 35 to 55 research projects. The average project duration is 2.5 years, and the average cost is $250,000. Last month, the Commissioner has spoken about this research project that has won a High Value Research Award. So this project dealt with addressing the pedestrian safety in Metro Atlanta. And as part of the project, we needed to gather the data and observe the behaviors of our pedestrians, specifically where are they crossing intersections and different streets, and also how often. As part of the project, we have acquired a trailer that's displayed on this slide, and that trailer is equipped with 4 cameras that are capturing pedestrian behavior. For this research, we also acquired the software that's storing all of this data, and eventually it will provide us with reports so that we can implement some safety initiatives or improvements. Another kind of innovative research project that we have completed recently and are very excited about implementing deals with our concrete tag. So displayed on the right-hand side is a concrete sample with a tag. And this is a new process that we would like to implement. At this current time, we just have a concrete sample and we attach a piece of paper to it. And this innovative process is going to be helping us to establish a chain of custody. As part of this research, we have also developed a mobile application so that these tags can be scanned by phones, and eventually we will upload all of this data to our internal database. And one fun event that's coming up and that I would like to invite you all to come is our annual Research Expo. For over 10 years, we've been holding these poster sessions where our researchers and their research teams are coming here on this very floor to display their research projects and to network a little bit with us and meet us. So this event is taking place on September 27th. And we are expecting around 70 different posters to be displayed. So if you are around in the building, please stop by and visit us. So this concludes the formal part of my presentation. And before I end it, I would like to recognize my team. And some of the members of my team are here today. I'd like them to stand up and use this opportunity to thank them very much for their hard work, determination, and willingness to always go an extra mile. Even though they are a small office, they deliver products that are not only beneficial, but also impactful and drive change. Thank you, guys. And now I'll take any questions that you might have.
I just want to say first, Alma, wow. This team and what you're doing is impactful. Commissioner, kudos to you, your leadership. Wow is the best way to describe what you've got going on.
Thank you. We love what we do. Thank you.
Any questions?
Comment, Ms. Keith?
Yes.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. I just want to acknowledge Alma and the entire team. The performance metric part is something I'm very passionate about, and we started this, how many, 5 years ago, you said? And I think we started with 2 or 3 measures. Now it's 300 because I keep adding them, and they don't like that. But it really, I just want to expand on that to understand that, and I know Corbett Reynolds is sitting here and is going to give a presentation from the district, but each office, the district offices, and each office here in each division reports out on their performance. But we start that meeting with our focus today is success. So if we're not being successful, what is it that we need to do to be successful? And because performance metrics can be looked at as a report card, and if you did really good in school, you were proud of your report card. If you're like me, sometimes you didn't want to show your report card. So you got to break that mindset that is punitive. It's all about focusing on the agency being successful. And it reminds me of a quote that I heard one time. It says, "Nothing increases your golf score like a witness." And so unless we have the witness, or the other thing we talk about, with our team members is, across the street at Tech, and I know Jamie will like this, on the scoreboard at Tech, you can look across the street. You need to know what the score is. You need to know what quarter you're in and how much time's remaining, because you adjust, and we have to adjust what we do based on all those conditions. So I just want to give them a huge shout out. The automation that Alma just slightly mentioned that and showed you those dashboards, it's a huge amount of work. And I want to give our IT folks a shout out too, because data sits in all kind of systems, and they're able to aggregate and pull data fairly now seamlessly, such that you can get these reports previously, for a long time, they were all done by hand or a spreadsheet, and the data manipulation was huge. They've been able to, through data warehousing and IT, what the great work IT has done, is be able to sit there real time and ask different questions and slice data different ways to look at things. And the best part about the performance metrics is the accountability of our staff. And even when we're not hitting the marks that we want to hit, it's always encouraging to me that our staff knows the reason why, and they can tell you in detail, here's what happened and why we didn't get to where we want it to be, and they're working on how do they correct that going forward. So it's a huge thing that OPMR does. As you see, very broad, diverse set of functions that they do, and I want to thank Alma for her leadership and the entire team. So thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me in those comments. I think Josh Waller may have a comment too, though, if you don't mind.
Well, during her presentation, you thought she sure knows what she's talking about. Well, it's because she does, and we want to recognize her for her 20 years of service with Georgia DOT.
Thank you.
There are no further questions. Do you have any comments, Elma? You've got 20 years.
Thank you. It's very exciting.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, that concludes the Administrative Committee meeting.
4 minutes. Get a whole 4 minutes.
Are you at the USDOT thing on Monday? USDOT thing? I just got an email. USDOT.
Committee as a whole today, and we have Joshua Waller to lead some discussion on mileage-based user fee scale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner. Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on GDOT's participation in coordination with the Eastern Transportation Coalition to execute a mileage-based user fee pilot project. So diving in there, we'll click on the finger. We'll cover the what. So what are we talking about? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And then ultimately circle back on the what. So the hope at the end of the presentation, if you were to get any questions in the future, you'll be able to sort of distinguish kind of what it is and what it isn't, just so that folks understand the scope of the project. So first, we'll cover, our wonderful world of acronyms. We got the word term MBUF, the acronym MBUF. It's mileage-based user fee. Somewhat self-evident, but it's mileage-based user fee charges drivers for the number of miles traveled, not on how much fuel is purchased. So when we think of the traditional way we fund transportation, it's usually excise taxes on motor fuel. I mean, historically, 100 plus years, federal government, state governments, highway trust funds are all predicated on that excise tax model. So what an MBUF is basically looking at, rather than that model of an excise tax on fuel or a registration fee or something like that, you're looking at the amount of miles driven and assessing the impact fee. Again, this is about the principle of, you're putting wear and tear on the roads. How do you make sure that kind of covered the user fee-based way we fund transportation so that we can keep up with the needs of the transportation system? So you got MBUF, that's one acronym, but just a couple of others there at the bottom. VMT, vehicle miles traveled, is a synonym, as well as road user charge, RUC. You'll hear that sometimes. And then pay per mile. That's another kind of quick term that you'll hear also. But for purposes of the Eastern Transportation Coalition, MBUF is sort of the preferred coin term. So why would we do an MBUF project? And so to evaluate its effectiveness in the long term is one way to preserve the principle of a sustainable user fee-based way to fund transportation. And so we're trying to preserve that. And preserve it and what immediately comes to mind maybe is EVs. That's the first thing that may come to mind. But the truth of it is, if you think about the near and immediate term, the role that hybrid vehicles play, and the role that, as you look there at some new models, what gas-powered vehicles, exclusively the mileage they're getting. So that's creating some challenges, not just here, but nationally, with that traditional model of how we fund transportation. And as mentioned, this is not just a Georgia issue, and this is not just a new issue. The past few federal transportation authorization bills have included funding in there, grant funding for states, and that's where the funds that we're actually, through the Eastern Transportation Coalition, drawing to do this pilot, to look at this issue of alternative ways to fund transportation. So it's a national issue, and I think the feds are going to be looking to the states, because obviously the federal gas tax is the core way that they fund the Federal Highway Trust Fund. So they're going to be looking to states as well to help advance this discussion of, as that becomes a less reliable model, what are the options that make the most sense from an implementation standpoint? And so they've got funds that have been set aside for that. This next slide shows you a map. I'll orient you a little bit. The blue states are part of the Western Coalition. The Western RUC is what they call themselves. You can see all the participants there with the yellow dots. And then you have the triangles, those green triangles, for those states that have done a standalone pilot project. Again, looking at alternative ways to fund transportation. Come to the Eastern Transportation Coalition states, those are the ones in green. And you can see the ones with little red-ish, orangish, reddish diamonds. So hopefully by this time next year, Georgia will have a little red diamond sitting on the top of it for having participated in one of these pilots. And again, these funds were secured through the Eastern Transportation Coalition. We actually were able to come in an earlier round than they originally thought we would be able to. So this is a federally funded pilot project, and it's also in this greater context of this national conversation about how do we, looking down the line, figure out how do we ensure we're funding transportation the way it needs to be funded, and keep, again, that principle of a user fee-based approach. So next, a little bit more, and you've had a presentation before, I think John Hibbert, our operations director, gave on the Eastern Transportation Coalition, their mission. But here's just a little bit deeper dive. Again, they are the main sponsor of the pilot. Just the work they've done with pilots, vehicle passenger pilots, as well as commercial. So the commercial vehicles, that's also looking at sort of multi-state efforts, understanding that dynamic of interstate travel and the very complex way of how do you back into where those funds should go back to which states based off where the trucks have been driving. But that gives you just some sense of the experience of the Eastern Transportation Coalition as we move forward. So next, I'll give a little bit of a timeline. So we're looking within this upcoming quarter into next quarter to sign up at least about 150 stakeholder participants. And so stakeholder, we're looking for folks that are involved in transportation, either agencies like CDOT board, hint, as well, if any of you would be willing to participate in the pilot, as well as elected officials, legislative aides, other folks that could kind of get that first round of experience. Because we anticipate we'll have this pilot, and then with future funding through the TETC, some other opportunities for maybe more expansive. Usually then you'll have a more expansive pilot, more broadly open to the general public. Though the general public, when this opens up, folks will be able to go to the website and sign up. But again, the focus is going to be on stakeholders.
Is this pilot to measure usage?
So this pilot is going to be across the board, is really about the experience for the user of the mileage-based approach. And that's going to be I'll talk a little bit more about this, but more about the technology, how it interacts. And then there is going to be a comparator understanding miles driven versus what they would have paid, what they did pay in motor fuel, and how might those two numbers compare. But The big thing is that after it's, and let me, so I'll mention at the end of the slide. So by the end of the year at least, we hope the actual pilot process to be underway. And that'll be the 150 individuals will have the device or the technology selected of their choice for a 4-month period to do the pilot. And then they'll also concurrent with that will be public surveys, just general public to ask their opinions and thoughts. This is really about gauging attitudes and also the educational process about folks understanding how do you think transportation is funded today? What do you think you pay in motor fuel tax? And so really that's a key component of it, is because today when you buy gasoline, you don't see a line for the gas tax because it was prepaid when the distributor sold the gas to the retailer. So it was an embedded tax. The taxable event was a transaction before, so we don't have that connection. Most people don't have that connection to what they paid in gas. They know what they pay in fuel, and so somewhere up there's this aggregate number they think that's just going for gas tax, which it isn't. It's a much smaller portion of what they paid in that gasoline price, but really getting at that type of information. And so those public surveys will be an important part of this process. Then once it's wrapped up, the preliminary analysis should take about 3 months and then have some initial results. And then 6 months into it, we'll have a final report. And again, that part of that analysis after the pilot's complete, they're going to be doing focus groups with individuals and surveys with those who participate in the pilot to get their feelings, get their feedback, and again, help sort of shape the conversation moving forward. And a little bit, so we don't have a website, TETC doesn't have a page up for Georgia yet, but Connecticut has the most immediate state to undertake a similar pilot. So there'll be a landing page somewhere for folks who are interested to participate in this pilot that'll look, I'm guessing will be pretty similar, and they'll enroll. And I'll make an important note here about the privacy component. So we're going to make every effort to get the 150 stakeholders that would like, but we will not know if any one individual has ever signed up for it unless they let us know. So once you sign up here, that no one will know that you signed up for it. So that just another thing that you'll go to this website. It'll have, for those potential participants, the information. There's a good video that we haven't made our video yet, but there'll be a video that'll explain it, and then more information for participants. So something you'll sort of have this as a resource, a landing page for folks to sign up, get those 150 people, and then important component is the choice. So we'll talk a little bit about the devices and the technology options available. Probably one of the predominant ones, you can see a little graphic of the sort of the little device that's going into and you have an onboard device OBD slot that can go in there. The technology goes there and it'll keep track of the miles. You have there are cell phone options. Whether or not that'll be part of ours or not, that's proving to be less and less used in pilots, but they have used like cell phone options for pilots in the past. And then you have the in-vehicle telematics. So some of these really smart vehicles, 1600 SAT type vehicles, right? That have that ability to provide that mileage information. And so to the degree that particular manufacturers have reached an agreement with like the Eastern Transportation Coalition to allow them to be able to share that information, you could also have that as an option. But the key thing is the participants will choose what works best for them. There's also a GPS and a non-GPS option for them. What would be the difference? With GPS, if they allow for the GPS, what it's tracking is in-state versus out-of-state, because it would be helpful to know, how many of these miles are in Georgia versus other states. But if ultimately they decide they don't want the GPS option, then the assumption of the pilot's going to be for those individuals that they were just in-state miles that they drove. So a little bit, one of the key things that we've seen you look at those devices, you look at that technology, and obviously the whole privacy component comes up in the discussion of it. So that's one of the benefits they've also seen from people who have done these other pilots is, one, they get the experience of knowing, okay, I have choice in this. I have some ability to say how I would want to report it, and how that works, and then the agreements that are tied up into it to protect and safeguard their safety, as well as how the information, once it's used for the purpose of generating the mileage for the individual, how it's not retained longer than 90 days and then ultimately destroyed. But they looked at and they asked folks after, before the pilot, what was their anxieties about this? And, 52% said they were concerned about privacy. Then they found after they surveyed everyone, after they had gone through the experience, that number only dropped down and was only 7%. So the experience of having participated in the pilot helped them get a better understanding, okay, what's really at risk? What kind of data am I sharing? And I think it gave them that perspective. Again, I think a lot of us, once you sit there and think about our cell phones that are going with us everywhere, we realize, there's a lot of pieces of information we give away on a daily basis. And this one, that type of information is very useful to making sure that we fund our transportation system, potentially. So again, kind of wrapping up sort of what is the MBUF again. Again, so that if you get asked, okay, you know what it is and what it isn't, hopefully. It's informational, so nobody will pay. There's no change to the way people pay their taxes today. You'll still buy, if you buy gasoline or if it's your registration fee, none of that will change if you're a participant. It's informational. 150 volunteers, stakeholders are who we're looking for. Participants will be able to select their choice of reporting option. The pilot itself will be for a 4-month period, and then we'll be evaluating the results from the surveys, the experiences, the focus groups to kind of identify next steps. With that, concludes my presentation.
I have a couple questions. First, will the participants be able to access the data? For example, I use MileIQ, GPS-based, to track my mileage. Will I be able to see my mileage?
So I have participated in one individually, and yes, you get that information.
Oh, that's nice.
You will get the information, and then you'll get an information. So when I did one with the same through TETC, you get at the end of the period, you kind of get what you would have paid with an MBUF compared to what your estimated gas tax.
Right.
Mine was actually within like $1.
So you actually put in your make and model, it calculates what you're... So my only question, really, to drill down a little bit on, we saw the beginning of people moving away from very large, older model, gas-guzzling vehicles to more efficient vehicles, then to hybrid, then to EV. But part of that drive to move people towards something that was safer for our environment was also impacted by the pocketbook. And the desire to save money through getting something more efficient was part of that movement away from these larger, inefficient vehicles. This seems to me like it's somewhat counter to that an MBUF would be established for whatever type of vehicle is driven, because now you're charging by the mile, not necessarily by the fuel efficiency. Is there any consideration of that?
Well, I think when you're at the pilot level, because you only have you have a few states, I think 3, where they have actually incorporated an MBUF into their state law.
How they handle that?
And it's optional. So, and it's typically been where you have at present, I know, I think Utah, if it's an electric vehicle, instead of paying a registration fee, you could do the MBUF. And so the notion there is, so where you have just a flat registration fee that's designed to kind of approximate average, well, you'll have some people who argue, well, I drive much less than the average, and so I'm penalized by a flat registration fee. So in the states where you've had early adoption of an MBUF in any way into their statute, it's on the optional front. And I think to your point, this is obviously a major change to how you fund transportation. Is not going to happen overnight, and you're talking probably about years and potentially a couple of decades before you really see some of a complete transition over. But you have to begin understanding what are the options out there. And so I would view this pilot in the prism of fact-finding and understanding, and that's why so much focus is placed on talking to the consumers about it. It's really about the consumer experience. It's certainly learning more about technology and how people fare with it. It's helpful, but I think they're really wanting to understand how people interact with it. And that's where the education piece coming in is yes, certainly there are savings that we want to achieve and folks are looking to achieve, but in the long term, when you're talking about large portions of the population, how do we ensure that we have preserved that user fee approach? So as people are no longer consuming gas or their vehicles are more efficient, you start getting away from that model that has historically ensured that transportation had at least a baseline level of funding. So I think it's at this point, we're still at that educational phase. And
yeah, I
learning
just
and
like to look
understanding.
ahead into, from data to acceptance.
Yeah.
You know, and you need that consumer buy-in and acceptance along the way. And it's something to consider, because that's, you know, I don't think we have a choice. We're going to have to go to this type of user fee-based system. But I just, you know, I'm trying to play devil's advocate and saying, well, we need to make sure we consider the fact that those who have gone to more efficient vehicles are going to feel like they have been, you know, taken a step backwards, because now they're going to be paying basically the same. It's just for future discussion.
Absolutely.
Owen has a question.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. You know, today we collect our money at the pump, and you pay as you go. And some of the questions here that I would have is, how are you going to pay as you go? And if you have to get into a collection process, that'll be a nightmare, trying to collect fees and what have you. If you don't have a method of collecting, you know, from the user, whatever kind of technology you use is one thing, but how you collect is the most important part. And in today's world, you know, it'd be hard. And I mean, it's no different than anything. The cost or the mileage or whatever how you charge will mount up to one, you know, single amount, unless you have a way of collecting, you know, every month or whatever. But it really concerns me when we look at the future of transportation collections and how we fund transportation.
It's a great question, just like Mrs. Williams' question is. The key thing here is we are at the early, because we're so early in the process, this is purely about understanding where we are. There's a lot of great questions that at some point down the line, how you implement it.
Well, here's the other question right today. How are we collecting today? They're pushing EV fast. It's not something that's just going to come a few years down the road. It's coming every day, more and more every day. And my question right now, how are we going to collect today? You know, what they're using. I know they pay a fee. I don't know how much or how they factor that in.
So correct. Today there is a flat fee for electric vehicles, an annual registration fee that when the General Assembly said it, it was sort of trying to back into what that average was. Mm-hmm. And I think the long term, so back to the point made about, okay, what would looking in the future look like? So we'll look at these other states where they have brought it in the near term. It's been as an option. So if you were to think in a state where someone's got a flat fee, you give them the option. In lieu of the flat fee, you could have a option for an MBUF, your choice. Do you want the MBUF? And then if you know you're going to drive less than what that average fee, that might be good for you. And I think that would be, if you're looking down the immediate term, that would be probably a logical place to look. Again, I don't want to get ahead of the General Assembly. I don't want to get ahead of this process, but I would think that would be, you'd have those type of things where it's optional, where you see more and more people doing it, get a sense about scale, economies of scale, implementation, back office, how does that all work? It may be that there are other solutions, there are other ways that the market evolves. I mean, obviously we've seen what disruptive technology can do and how we have to think, but at the moment, this seems like an important thing to investigate. And again, this focus is getting those the user's experience, understanding how so that we get that information back, and that'll inform likely another round of pilots and other studies to get us to that point before you ever start setting policy or because it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue.
This is just a throw this out. It would have been so much easier when they created these electrical systems that they could just put a credit card in there and you pay as you go. I mean, I didn't understand, like we do today, we stick a credit card into the machine.
Yeah.
Well, the machine should have been built that way to me. If you can do gas, to me, it looked like you can do electricity the same way.
Yeah.
Have a question?
I'll just, say Josh has the first 14 gadgets for each of you to participate. You can be the innovator, one of the first 14. He didn't mention the microchip option, that we would microchip you, but,
They're not looking.
So, certainly, invite you to participate as this gets stood up here toward the end of the calendar year. Hopefully we can be at that stage. Again, we're working third party, which again, sort of scale of economy. And to Mr. Bowen, to your point, the other pilots that have been done around the nation, the back office cost is a big driver. And I think I'm right, or at least I'll be in the ballpark. I believe there's close to 11 million vehicles registered in Georgia, 10.5 to 11, which is about 1 for population. So, if you like my house, I've got a few cars sitting in the driveway. So it becomes, the collection part's a whole nother thing, but there is a lot of technology solutions, and your notion of a credit card tied to a vehicle is doable today. The technology is there. It's just a matter of choice, as Josh said, choice and what the future may be. And to Ms. Williams' point of equity, that's the other thing that this does is, wear and tear. You can slice and dice this a lot of ways, even by vehicle weight, to wear and tear on roadways and what have you. So lots of things with technology that are there, but it's a good thing. I'm glad that we're a pilot part of this. This did come up in the legislature this last year, encouraging us to look at that through the EV Joint Study Committee. That was I guess that was last year now, 2 years ago, to make sure that we're engaged and involved to be a leader, and we'll learn a lot. And every state is unique, so we'll learn things that are unique to Georgia as compared to Connecticut or Virginia. Virginia has deployed themselves. That you can opt into a program now. So a lot to learn, and we'll get you signed up and ready to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Josh, let me ask you, did I understand you say that the motor fuel tax is collected at the distributor
That transaction?
And not at the retail?
Correct.
The retail,
Not
so the
when you
distributor-
purchase. It's embedded when you buy your gallon of gasoline. That cost has however they pass it on, it's embedded in the price of that.
It's remitted to the state by the distributor, not the
Correct.
individual.
Correct. So it's a much more limited number of motor fuel taxpayers in the state.
And how do these devices know where you are and going and?
So I mean, so with some of them, you've got the GPS and non-GPS. It's just the technology, much like in your cell phone today.
So it'll know what road you're on.
It could, but that's where you make the decision between, do you want a GPS or non-GPS? And again, going back to that, the value of GPS for the purpose of the pilot. Again, folks don't want that. They can opt, I don't want that. But it's to identify the in-state versus out-of-state. And that's really, it's important for passenger vehicles. That's really important for when you look at commercial vehicles, because there's the way that we currently distribute motor fuel taxes among states through what's called IFTA, and trying to apportion what a truck may fill up in state X, but then do a lot of driving in state Y. And so there's actually a very somewhat complex way to sort of settle those accounts for equity to sort of distribute those funds. So how do you do that under an MBUF type situation? So for commercial vehicles, that GPS data, that understanding what states they're driving in is really important. Maybe less so for passengers, but that's why that option exists of GPS versus non-GPS. It's the understanding the in-state versus out-state mileage. And also, really getting more nuanced is you'll have some vehicles that are driven on, and when you go down one, let's say you have a property, you do most of your driving of that vehicle on your own land. Let's say you got a farm or something. Somewhere down the line, if you had this system in place, is there a way to to take into account that if someone's putting the vast majority of that vehicle's miles on private property, should the question is, should that be subject to the VMT? And so how do you start to understand which miles were not on public roads versus what were? So that's one component of why you need to think through the GPS versus non-GPS.
Thank you very, very much, Judge. Are there any further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Now, Mr. Corbett Reynolds, District 2 update.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner. Appreciate the opportunity to come and brag a little bit on District 2 and the hard work that our men and women have been doing. It's been a couple of years since I've been here. I think it was September of 2021 since I was here, so glad to see y'all again. Make sure I know how to operate the clicker. Look at there, I do. All right, so my agenda for District 2 is not much different than the agenda you've seen for other districts. So we'll have an overview about the district. We'll talk a little bit about some of our accomplishments and our challenges, and then we'll close out with updates on some construction projects as well as quick response program. So District 2 is located in East Central Georgia, made up of 26 counties, and we have 4 congressional districts that overlap our boundaries. We're a rural district, a lot of territory to cover, and so we got about 7,800 lane miles, and would also like to point out that there's 187 centerline miles of interstate. That'd be I-20, I-16, and then I-520 Bobby Jones Expressway in Augusta. Okay, so let's talk about employment in District 2, and one of the challenges we've been working on since the last time I was here. We're up to 422 full-time employees. Like to point out the 9 summer interns, great work by Nicole Glenn in the recruiting office. That speaks to the opportunity that we have to grow as a district in the future and meet some of our challenges. But the work they've done statewide in that program is great as well. 63 vacant positions, that's a big number, but I'd like to consider that when I was here in FY 21 or calendar year 21, we were at nearly 25% vacant. And a lot of our vacancies were in maintenance. So change has been made, pay's been improved, and that's helped a lot of it, but it's also a lot of work by recruiting, not just the recruiting by Nicole Glenn's office, but recruiting from our district office personnel as well. We've worked that down to 13% in 2 years. I think that's an incredible amount. Most of that's been in maintenance. I need to make sure y'all understand that. 87 highway maintenance technicians, that's the entry level in maintenance, has been hired in FY 23. 324, almost 80% of our workforce are maintenance employees. So 324 out of the 422. Now, again, a lot of work done to get there, increase vacancies or decrease vacancies in maintenance. We only have 27 vacant positions, around 27 positions in maintenance, but other places we have a lot of work to do in pre-construction, we're all right away, location crews, design staff, that's 16% vacant, 33% vacant traffic operations. And really where we're hurting the most is the people who look at our operational improvements, or process our permits, and our engineers. So they're about 50% vacant in that part of traffic operations. And then utilities and construction, hovering around 40% vacant. So we've had some hirings, but one of the things we're struggling with is keeping those people. So it's not just the hiring part of it, it's retaining part of it, and that's an ongoing problem for all of us. We're a young district, average tenure 10 years, and a lot of that's in maintenance. 64 of our 97 highway maintenance technicians have less than 1 year of service. Very important that we have a maintenance skills development program to get them trained as quickly as possible. Very important that we have stuff like our CDL training program to get their CDL license and stuff for them as quickly as possible. So we're proud, and we're working very hard in those areas. But if you look in the areas of need as well, I mentioned construction, go to the Augusta inspection team, that construction staff has less than 1 year of experience. Now, thank goodness we have consultants that have some experience and they can help in that training as well, but you see the challenges we're having in that area. And there's the next thing that concerns me. 10% of us retire over the next 5 years. And I've got quite a few staff members that are already, with 2 staff members in District 2 that are already there. They've pledged 2 more years to me, so got some time to work on that. But there's the back end of that. Now we've got to do a lot of knowledge transfer. We've got to, take what they know and start getting into the whoever's going to replace them and get those opportunities out there. So that sounds kind of, well, maybe not the best way to open up how things are going in District 2, but what I'd really like to talk to you about is the things that we're doing as a district. The recruiting office does a great job in recruiting. The district, just like other districts, participates in recruiting at the colleges with Nicole Glenn's staff. But back in 2019, we started looking at, well, what can we do as a district to, to let people know what we do at GDOT so we could, bring in our own employees and really recruit. When you're a rural district like District 2 and Tunnel, recruiting locally is very important. So we need to get into the high schools and figure out, let them know what we do. So Michael Taylor, our district maintenance manager, and Caleb Lord, our district construction manager, have worked very hard, excuse me, in establishing that relationship with Washington County. Began in 2019, and then of course the pandemic got in the way, and we had a little bit of discontinuation, but the program had started off pretty good enough that, or well enough that the counselors and the vocational teachers called us back and said, hey, can we get this going? That was really, our students were really interested in that. So what do? We're targeting high school students that are maybe get a 2-year degree, but for the most part are looking to enter the workforce. So we bring them into a classroom environment for about 30 to 45 minutes, talk about the opportunities at GDOT, give them the boring stuff, the retirement plan stuff. They kind of glazes over. They get a little bit more excited when you start about the payment, the salaries they may earn, but they get real excited when they find out that we're not looking for you to be skilled. We will train you. We talk a lot about maintenance skills development and what that means for them. We talk a lot about the CDL training that I talked about earlier, but then we let them know in construction, we don't just throw you to the wolves. You don't have to have a degree in construction. We have a training program in construction as well, just like we do in location. So after that, we break them up into groups and we let them visit the campus. And we have employees that are excited as they can be. It's probably some of the best days to watch our employees get excited about working with the high school students and getting the questions they're getting from them. And to see a kid walk up to a motor grader that's got tires on it that tall and them climb up in it, that's pretty cool for them. So we try to make it as interactive as they can. They go to our mechanic shop, they go to our welding shop, the signal shop, sign shop, various shops around the district campus. We even put tools. If you look at that picture to your left, that's a mastic machine. It's used to fill real thin potholes, if you will, and let them spread that material around, see how that's like. But we also let them do cool little things too. We've got a drone up in the air videoing what's going on that day. We let them operate the drone a little bit as well. Let them work with our location crew and get an understanding of how that equipment works. So we try to make it as interactive as we can. The cool thing is, not big numbers, but there is a start. We've had 10 people hired since 2021, since we restarted this thing from Washington County. Now, new employment orientation was this past Monday. And I like to ask in new employee orientation, how did you find GDOT? And indeed, what we hear a lot. But there's a kid sitting to the right, and he says, I was here with the high school. And I'd forgotten. He told me Jefferson County High School. I said, well, doggone, I forgot that we already tried to expand it. So we've already reached out to Jefferson County High School middle of last year. And here's a student that said, yeah, I liked what y'all had to say. I like to hear what you had to say about training, and I'm very interested in getting my CDL license. So we can already see the early returns. That partnership as well has led to getting into the STEM classes, and that's more of the long-term recruit, right? That's where we get the opportunity to go in and talk to these college-bound students. And Caleb Lord led that effort, and he visited Washington County last year. I think he taught 3 different classes and talked to them about how their science and math relates to an engineering program, engineering degree, and then what your opportunities are at GDOT if you do pursue engineering. Then he made it interactive as well. He had a little setup where they could use sand, dirt, a little bit of water. We used some of our cold mix patching material to build a road, and we didn't do like the commissioner did and let him steal his wife's roller, but I think he went and purchased some cheaper ones at Walmart. But the lessons learned. So anyway, the main thing is we see the need to get into these school systems and tell them about GDOT. If there's one thing we've been learning is that people don't know what we do. The first thing we heard that from were the vocation teachers. They were like, we had no idea y'all did all this. So great partnership there. Okay, we'll start getting into the accomplishments from some of our sections. We'll start with maintenance, and maintenance is in assets and operations in a district. And on the asset side is where we do our contracting side, right? So we started off with a budget of about $12.4 million. Through the amended budget, we ended up investing about $13.3 million in our maintenance needs in the District 2. Two areas I'd like to highlight would be in service contracts. You see that $3.8 million. That's primarily in guardrail repair. A little over, I think it was right at 1,000 strikes that had to be repaired in District 2 in FY23. Drainage would be the area we had the least investment on this pie chart, $1.8 million. That was 93 drainage structures that were lined. And the reason we went after that as hard as we did was when I was here in 21, I talked about the washout of State Route 24 in 2 locations. And one of the places that washed out was due to a pipe that wasn't in the best of condition. Bottom of it was starting to rust out. So what I wanted to present you today is, hey, lessons learned. We're taking what we learned and what we can do better and maintaining our drainage structures and applying that to real fixes. Okay, we'll just highlight a few of the ITV projects. This portion on your left side of your screen is an approach slab repair in Richmond County. It was actually 2 locations, one over Doak Bernard Parkway and the other over a CSX Railroad Bridge. It's done by Masonic Construction Company for just over $869,000. Then on the right-hand side of your screen is vegetation management. If you're riding down I-16, you'll know you're in District 2 because District 3 and District 5 have cleared all their trees, and District 2 is lagging behind. So we're 2 years complete in a 7-year plan. We hope to have that done by FY28. I think I got the leader behind me. I was waiting on a comment from him. Mr. Paul Bunyan decided not to speak up. But anyway, this project is basically complete now. Went from milepost 32 to milepost 46 in Bleckley and Orange County. Yes, sir.
What do we do with the trees? Do we sell them wood, or is that a possibility? Or?
Yeah, the contractors are selling the wood. We don't see anything out of it. Hopefully, a better price since they're able to sell the lumber. But this contractor actually.
We just don't have to worry about taking trees down.
We don't have to worry about taking them down at the middle of the night. It's the main thing. I think that's the objective, not during a hurricane. So, so this is in Bleckley and Lawrence County between milepost 32 and milepost 46. Merit First was the contractor. This job cost about $2.3 million. And we've actually already let our next leg for I-16 tree contract. It went out just as soon as we could get contracts out, and I think that one's going to be a similar size contract. All right, pavement preservation. Alma talked about some of the performance metrics and stuff we use very much in our pavement preservation program. We look at our scores she was talking about with pavements and determine where we need to do types of pavement preservation and what types they may be. Just kind of feeding back off some of the work she was talking about. But State Route 29 and State Route 46 in Treutlen County, 2 different locations, about 2 miles long for there. It's a thin lift overlay, so we put down an inch of asphalt in those areas. And that was done by East Coast Asphalt for a little over $460,000. All right, let's talk a little bit about operations. That'd be the 324 maintenance employees we were talking about. Shoulder building and shoulder clipping will always be important for any DOT, especially as far as Georgia DOT goes. And our crews were able to complete between those 2 jobs over 4,200 shoulder miles. And very important, you need a good recoverable shoulder for our vehicles traveling down the road, but you also need to get the water off the road. Once you get the water off the road, ditching is just as important, right? The water needs someplace to go. And crews were able to complete nearly 50,000 linear feet of ditching. Okay, the signs truck there, that's a very valuable piece of equipment. It's not an expensive piece of equipment. It's a repurposed flatbed truck with a sprayer that's really meant for parking lots if it's anything. You might get 5 to 6 miles out of that little sprayer. And if I were to tell you that we got 117 lane miles of work done out of it, you say, well, that's not a whole lot, 117 lane miles, and you told me you had almost 7,800 lane miles. The cool thing about this truck is it fills a void that we probably can't get a good price or a good option from our contracting side of the house. So if imagine that asphalt crew that they're following, they're going to put down a 25-foot patch, they're going to put down a 50-foot patch, they may skip 3 miles ahead and put down a 200-foot patch, and then they leave that county and they're off to the next county to work. We got to have a way to get one that strike down in the time frame that we need it down in. I don't think the contracting world can meet that requirement, but then the cost for them to do that would be incredible. So they feel that niche that we need for our own crews to do, and they do a great job of keeping up with that. So when you think about 117 lane miles, when you're doing those little short sections, that really adds up. On the right is a cable barrier repair. I mentioned the over $3 million that we do in guardrail repairs. We offset that service contract, extend that service contract, if you will, by putting the cable barrier repairs on our own people. So each area that has cable barrier, those crews are responsible for those repairs. It can be very, very labor intensive. As you see, the guy on the ground, he's not taking a break. He's actually doing probably one of the hardest parts, pulling that bottom cable down so that you can slide that bar in there. When you get those last few bars in there, y'all would not believe how tight that cable gets. You see it sometimes, it's almost sagging on the ground. Mm-hmm. After you get about, say it's a 50-foot break, you may get to that last 20 feet and it gets very difficult. Mm-hmm. You may have remembered District 2 with the back saver innovation. We had the dump truck that would lift up the cable barrier and help those crews so they didn't have to work so hard and possibly hurt their backs. Well, that innovation's great, but not for this type of cable barrier. This type of cable barrier is a Bryphon, I believe, and it actually weaves in and out, where the other cable barrier, it just connects differently and allows you to pick it up as one unit. So we use that still where we have that system, but for the most part, that type of operation has to be done now. Finally, in operations, you can't talk about maintenance without talking about emergency operations. Y'all recall the tornadoes that touched down across Middle Georgia back in January, and District 2 and Jasper and Newton counties wasn't spared. 232 employees have participated. If y'all remember, this was a state of emergency, so we worked on system as well as on local roads. They hauled off 1,341 loads over a 12-day period, nearly 11,000 man-hours spent doing that work for a cost of $478,000 and some change. Okay, we'll talk about traffic operations and some of their accomplishments. The signal personnel performed 345 preventive maintenance inspections on various traffic signals throughout the district. We also had 69 safety enhancement reviews to improve the safety of our roadways. And our engineers completed 60 encroachment permits, which is about a 30% increase over the previous year. Now, when you're in a district, sometimes you get some unique challenges that come your way. And Millen, Georgia is no different. The railroad crossing issues there have been quite complex. And so we reached out to Alan Davis and the SIGOPS team and said, we need to see if y'all can give us some help. And they came up with this plan. And if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you see locations marked A, B, and C. Those are the locations of the different crossings impacted. To understand Millen, you got a north-south rail line that runs for Norfolk Southern and an east-west connection that's right there. Generally where that B is where that rail yard is. So because of those two tracks coming together, you get a lot of activity on that rail and a lot of block crossings. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. If you were traveling from, say, right there at the bottom of your screen, up 17 from the south, at about the 6 o'clock portion on your screen on the left-hand picture, as you approach that intersection, you've got the simple, y'all seen them before, preemption system with the sign flashing and it says railroad crossing blocked. That would allow you to make the option as you proceed forward to get on 17 bypass and go back to 121 to go into Millen. If you were to come to the intersection that would be coming from 17 off, so say the 3 o'clock portion of State Route 17 comes in at about 3 o'clock coming from Midville, or if you were coming from Statesboro up into Winthrop Avenue, you would be greeted by an intersection. If the train was blocking it, say at B, you would have those signs telling you that railroad crossing is blocked. Now, the main vehicles that we're targeting here, I mean, it's your passenger cars too, but we're really targeting our trucks. and it was our trucks that were trying to find ways when those crossings were blocked, and they were heading off into city streets and stuff like that at all hours of the night, so causing a lot of problems for the locals there. So along the bypass, if you were coming from Sylvania on 21 or coming out of Waynesboro traveling south to Millen or coming from Sardis on 23, as you get to the bypass, in that oval picture, you would be greeted by a message board that would give you the alternate route for you to take. It works really well if B and C, one of the two, are not blocked. If B and C are both blocked, it gets a little bit more cumbersome. We will direct you to 17 to get through there, but it comes a little bit more winding. And of course, all three blocked, then our best message is find alternative route. That's the best we can do at this point. If you're wondering the cost of this, it ran around $161,000. So I think that's a mild investment for improving the user experience as they travel through Millen and getting people through Millen with the trains there. Another cool thing about this, we're collecting data on all of this. So we're hoping that, I'm hoping that future conversations with Norfolk Southern will be more productive, where we can say, hey, look, these are the times that you're there and this is how often it is. And really we're only asking to keep one of the B or C crossings open at any given time. That would make this system work a whole lot better. Okay, we'll go to utilities. Utilities office has been quite busy. Alma mentioned the metric target for 5 days for getting our permits turned around. Our guys were able to do 1,041 permits in FY 23 on a 3.4-day average, so that's a pretty good job. They also certified 36 projects for lettings in FY 23, and they're currently performing utility coordination on 145 projects that are in various stages of design and active construction. Pre-construction, the district location office surveyed the property for 14 new projects and inspected the work of numerous survey contractors. The design office delivered the majority of their project deliverables on time or before the scheduled time, with an average quality assurance score of 97% for FY 23. And finally, but not least, district right-of-way office completed the property acquisition of 16 projects, with the majority of those projects being on schedule. DT right-of-way also acquired well over 450 parcels on multiple other projects with the assistance of our consultant services. All right, construction update. District 2's probably got more active construction than we've had in a long time based on the numbers you see there. And the good news I have for y'all is we're not going to go through all 76 projects on your screen, but I would like to highlight 2 corridors. We'll start off with the US 1 corridor in Jefferson County. It's made up of 4 projects. We got 3 prime contractors on there. We're right at $130 million. The significance of this project, or these 4 projects, is that once they're completed, we'll have the GRIP corridor completed on US 1 between I-16 all the way up to the Fall Line Freeway. So not just an accomplishment in Jefferson County, but you can see what that's going to do for freight mobility in the future as soon as those projects are done. So we'll go through those projects and give you an update. We'll start in the south, where we start at the Wadley Bypass, and this project's 6.6 miles long. It goes from the Wadley Bypass to the Louisville Bypass. E.R. Snell is the contractor. The completion date is June of 2024. This project's about $50.1 million. They're approximately 30% complete. The bridge, there's actually 2 bridges that are under construction on this during this stage, and both are near completion. They brought in some extra crews for doing the roadway grading and stuff, so we expect them to kind of accelerate the roadway grading and hopefully have our first traffic shift in before the end of the calendar year. Then on the right is 222-150. This project's 2.9 miles long, and it's the widening of the Louisville Bypass. CNH Paving has this project. The current completion date is May of 2023, so we missed the completion date. We do owe them a little bit of time for weather. Their project's about $17.9 million. They've committed to us to staying on the project. They have had some issues with some utilities as well, but they've committed to staying there, and we look to have that project done the fall of this year. We've got actually a progress meeting scheduled with them later this month to get a definitive date on their completion. And then 222-160, we'll begin at the Louisville Bypass, north of the Louisville Bypass, and go to Mennonite Church Road, which is about halfway to Rennes, Georgia. Reeves Construction Company out of Augusta has this project. Completion date is August of '24. Contract amount's about $27.2 million and they're roughly 50% complete. This project is just slightly behind schedule, but they're preparing for some traffic shifts as well through here. And as soon as we get those traffic shifts in, we're confident they'll regain that schedule easily, especially if we have a dry summer. Dry summer. 222170 is the next project, 6.5 miles long. It picks up at Mennonite Church Road and then extends to the Fall Line Freeway just below Ren's. 2 bridges on this project. It's being built by E.R. Snell. Current completion date is May of '24, and the contract amount's $34.4 million. They're about 45% complete, and they are on schedule. We have a traffic shift. If it doesn't happen this week, the traffic shift will happen next week, and then I expect that schedule to really accelerate, and hopefully they'll stay ahead of schedule on that project. Okay, our next corridor is in Morgan and Putnam counties on 441. We've got 2 projects there. E.R. Snell is the contractor on both of them, and right at $103 million worth of investment on those 2 projects. Again, the significance of this is once this is completed in those 2 counties, we'll have a GRIP corridor completed between I-16 in Dublin all the way to I-20 in Madison. So that's going to be good news for travelers in the near future. We'll start in the south in Putnam and go north. 0013615 is about 9.65 miles long. It goes from the Edenton bypass to the Morgan County line. This project completion date is August of 2025, and its contract amount is about $60.6 million. They're about 16% complete. I love the picture that well, let me show you the picture. How about that? I love the picture that we've got for that project. If anything, it shows how they're working hard grading around those utility poles. You can see the power's already been taken off the top, and they're continuing to grade while we're waiting on the communication lines to be done. Anytime I see contractor pursuing work like that, it always makes me feel good that they're doing everything they can to pursue the work. Then on next project is 0013614. This project begins at that Putnam County, Morgan County line, and then extends all the way to just shy of I-20 in Madison. The current completion date is March of 2024, and this project's about $42.2 million. I've got 90% complete, but they're further along than that. We've got just a little bit of paving to do. I think they've got 1 minor traffic shift that they're performing this week, and this project is, we're looking at August completion date, but even if it slips a month, maybe 2 months at the worst, we're going to bring E.R. Snell, DOT, going to bring this project in 6 to 8 months early. So that's unusual given the times we've been in. Okay, finally, quick response. Matt Salmons is my district state aid coordinator, and I put a lot on him, not just working with the local governments, but I have him over our program for quick response, and Matt's done a great job getting our 9 projects this past year, contracts out for those projects. As you can see, nearly $1.5 million invested, and that's important knowing those projects are $200,000 or less. What you're looking at your screen is State Route 44. It's in the Lake Oconee area at the intersection of Publix. This was an addition of a left turn lane. Before the left turn lane was put in, traffic was backing all the way up, and that intersection leaning longer and causing some backups there. So this project was done for $156,000, and Pittman Construction Company was the contractor. And that pretty much wraps up my update for District 2. I'll be glad to take any questions or comments. Yes, sir.
Comments being not District 2. There's a lot of good process being done.
Yes, there is. We've been very busy in District 2. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay. And the last presentation we have today with Bridge Posting Report by Andrew Heath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Commissioner. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. As you recall, one of the most high-profile issues that was discussed and debated in the last legislative session was House Bill 189, or what was casually referred to as truck weights. GDOT was a prominent participant in those debates and those discussions regarding that bill. And one of the things that we communicated during that time was requirements and activities that we would be required to carry out pending the passage of that bill. And the purpose of this presentation is to give you an update on those activities now that the bill has passed, and the implementation of 189, including the posting of structures across the state of Georgia. So just have a few slides for you to give you an update on where we are, but as a reminder, what HB 189 did, again, it was signed by the governor on May 3rd of this year. Upon that signature, it became effective immediately. So it became law as soon as that bill was signed. It allowed a 10% variance on gross vehicle weight and axle weights, on gross vehicle weight up to 88,000 pounds for certain commodities on the state route system here in Georgia and on the local system here in Georgia. It does not apply to the 13 counties within the ATL authority's jurisdiction. And as a reminder, those counties are Cherokee, Clayton, Cobb, Coweta, DeKalb, Douglas, Fayette, Forsyth, Fulton, Gwinnett, Henry, Paulding, and Rockdale. So essentially the broader metro Atlanta area. And it is a temporary measure in that it expires on July 1st, 2025. So we do expect this discussion to continue in upcoming legislative sessions. I've listed the applicable commodities for you just so you get a better idea of what they are. Essentially what we're talking about are agricultural products. The last two items, they're highlighted: agricultural finished goods or recovered materials to processing facilities. Those were the two items that were added as part of this. There was already a variance in law that covered some of the other items you see listed there. Those two bolded items there were added as part of this bill. It also permanently restructured the fines for weight violation by type and by tier, so essentially how overweight the truck is. It's established a tiering structure, and it authorized local law enforcement to enforce these weights on local roads and bridges, so not just the Department of Public Safety. So we saw a little bit of an expansion there as it relates to enforcement. So some key dates for you as we think about the implementation of House Bill 189. On April 13th, actually in advance of when this bill became law, GDOT proactively sent a letter to Federal Highway informing them of this potential law change per the passage of the bill. And that letter essentially stated what our plan of action would be to stay compliant with federal law per this change in truck weights here in Georgia. So we provided that to them on April 13th. As I mentioned, on May 3rd, the governor did in fact sign HB 189, and that set into effect these actions that we are having to carry out to implement HB 189 here in Georgia. So per federal law, one of the things that we have to do and are required to do is carry out what we call a load rating of all structures in accordance with that change in law. And the federal regulation gives us 90 days, or essentially 3 months, to do that. So you see the key date there of August 3rd, 2023. By that date, we have to carry out a load rating analysis of all impacted structures in Georgia per federal regulation. Now, a load rating analysis is an actual engineering analysis, and we have to do it structure by structure to look at the condition of the bridge, the associated impact of the change in law, i.e. the higher truck weights, and determine the carrying capacity of that structure, which would lead to either then posting the structure for a limitation of load or not, if the structure is deemed to be sufficient to carry the increased truck weights. So immediately upon signature by the governor, our bridge office, led by Don Bigamon, who's back there, got to work carrying out this load rating analysis for all of the structures across the state. And just to give you an idea, there are about 15,000 of them here in Georgia. So that was a heavy lift that they have carried out per that regulation in federal code. The way we do it is it's tied to our inspections of bridges. Typically, we are required to inspect bridges every 2 years. So as part of that, we go and look at the condition of the structure, we look at how the structure was built, how it was designed, and we inspect it, and then subsequently carry out a load rating and potential posting of that structure. So we've been hard at work doing that load rating analysis, not just for state structures, but for locally owned structures as well. And then subsequently, federal law requires that we have to then go actually post the structures, the results of that load rating analysis, go out and physically put signs up to say this bridge is now posted based on the results of the load rating within 30 days of carrying out that analysis activity. So our deadline on that, as you can see, is September 2nd of this year. We are already underway posting structures in Georgia as we have carried out the analysis. So that activity is happening now. Now, this is critical. Doing this activity is absolutely imperative for us. One, for the protection of our infrastructure as it relates to increased loading in trucks. But also, the receipt of federal aid funding is conditional on us complying with this regulation, meaning that if we don't carry out these activities per the deadlines listed there, Federal Highway can withhold federal aid funds to the department or to a local government that doesn't carry out their needed activities. So us doing our job is critical per these deadlines. Local governments doing what they are required to do is absolutely critical per these deadlines. So this map shows what I'm calling the current or pre-HB 189 bridge postings in the state of Georgia. It's about a little over 1,350 structures that had been posted across the state. The vast majority, as you can see, are locally owned, but you can see the dots there, sort of the distribution across the state. That's sort of the state of play as we discussed HB 189 during the session. And here are the results of the load rating analysis that has been carried out by the Bridge Office. So this is a completed analysis, so we finished that in advance of that August date that I talked about. So we are ahead of schedule, which is great. Don and his staff have been working very hard at this. But essentially, this translates to 733 new postings, either of new bridges or different truck configurations for axle weights, of which 306 are state-owned and 427 are locally owned. And you can see the map there. Now, I'll draw your attention to the Metro Atlanta region. You don't see any dots there. That's that ATL carve-out, the 13-county carve-out that I referred to earlier. Each of you should have in front of you a zoomed-in version of this for your congressional district, which shows the first map are the pre-HB 189 postings. The second map are the new postings. If your district is entirely within the ATL region, you will not see any new postings. And then the final map is what we're calling the current and new. So essentially those two summed together. And then if you have new postings, there is a listing of the exact structures, the specific structures that will be posted as a result of this analysis. If you need any more detailed information specifically as to how your district is impacted, we're certainly happy to provide that, whether you're looking for specifics on the postings themselves or any other additional information, just please let me know. But as you can see, moving forward, once we have fully carried out this activity, we're talking almost 2,100 current and new postings, and the breakdown between state-owned and locally owned you can see reflected there. So our next steps as we work to carry out the implementation of HB 189, first and foremost, it shows here finalized completion of the load rating analysis. I can tell you now that that analysis is in fact done, which is great news. And official notifications to local governments are occurring now. So as we have finished that analysis, we are sending official letters to the impacted local government saying, by this date, certain, you need to have post structures, and we give those appropriate details for what structures need to be posted. And we are requiring sort of demonstration of carrying out that activity, i.e. take a photo of it, give us supporting information so that we can verify that we are in fact compliance with federal law. Again, the deadline for that is August 3rd. We will have sent all the letters out in advance of that date so that we are ahead of what federal law requires, with the verification happening no later than September 2nd. Posting is already underway by the department. I already mentioned that. On the map, I show that we will be posting statewide over 700 new postings across the state. I can tell you that as of today, we've completed over 250 structures have already been posted. So we have some work to do over the coming months, but we will be in advance of those dates. And we are installing and fabricating signs. You can see we do need to fabricate the signs that actually sit on the side of the bridge there and the approaches. It's about 1,500 signs that need to be ordered, installed, and fabricated across the state. And Corbett and his staff have been tremendously helpful at the districts in helping carry out this activity. And then finally, we'll be notifying, as these activities are finalized, we will notify the Department of Public Safety of the new in-place postings for the purposes of oversized and overweight routing. So a brand new statewide postings map will be developed, which is online on the MCC, Department of Public Safety Motor Carrier Compliance website. That is used to inform the routing of oversized, overweight trucks. It's very critical to understand that permitted loads under an annual permit are not allowed to cross posted bridges, so they have to route around those bridges. So as we are now posting 700 and some odd additional structures, that routing of those loads will have to change, and they need to be notified of what that required change is. So that will be happening in August as well. So again, I really need to thank our district forces. I need to thank Don and his team at the Bridge Office for carrying this out. This is a big lift as we work to implement HB 189. We will have this done in advance of the deadlines per federal law. And look forward to having this activity completed. So with that, I will take any questions.
Yes.
Can you go back to the last slide? So I want to make sure I understand this. The local governments are required for posting based on your information that you give them. You say this bridge needs to be posted, and they have to get the sign fabricated and they have to put it up. But there is some mechanism for punitive action if it isn't in compliance. It comes back to GDOT from the federal withholding of funds. How do we enforce the local required posting?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's why we're specifically asking for verification that that activity has been done. To be clear, the condition of federal aid fundings flowing through to the state or to a local government, that is dependent on which agency has not performed the posting as needed, right? So if the local government has not carried out that activity, we will notify them that they have not demonstrated compliance with this federal regulation, and that your jurisdiction receiving future federal aid funds is essentially now conditional on you carrying out this activity.
But it won't harm the...
Correct.
Okay, thank
now,
you.
if we don't do what we need to do, it certainly will.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a great point that Meg just, if we have projects within that local jurisdiction, we would not be able to spend federal aid money within that local jurisdiction, even if it's a GDOT sponsored activity. Right.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you.
I need a motion to go into executive session. A motion is second on for aye. Thank you. That's passed. Let's move that here to the back. Yeah. Okay. We're going back here. Yes. Pardon me? Yes, we're going back. Going back there. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so what, I know you're not going back to the rest, so.
I call the meeting back to order, please. Okay, all right. In favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The board will now come out of executive session. No action was taken while in executive session. The board intends to vote at the September meeting to change the commissioner's salary to $550,000 per year. It's all we discussed, as you all have a question. Okay. Me and Judge Joy. Okay, thank you all.